welcome to Enterprise Services Client Briefing Centre. Let's talk about why you're here today. Tell us why you're here.
So people want to talk about business process transformation and the move into a new paradigm of how you deliver managed business services to major companies.
So those business process services that you're talking about, how can they help businesses?
It's about the revolution of how you engage with customers at the front of the business, how you engage with your employees and your executive leaders in the mid part of the business, and how you actually then operate a vast supply chain network to convert inbound services and products to things that people want to buy, and to be able to do that at unprecedented speed.
And it's always the customer first, isn't it? That seems to be the key word.
You have to have the customer at the very central focal point for the entire business strategy. You start from there, you give the customer the preferences and in terms of how they want to engage with you, and then what you then do is to completely rewire the business processes and the information network to fully integrate the front, the middle and the back office in a paperless ecosystem where we're talking about processing at the speed of a chip.
Now, once you've nailed that down, once you realise that the way that this transformation happens is much more customer focused and it's kind of upends the traditional thinking in terms of business practice, then we go on to discussing this thing about automation. The other thing we're hearing about is this roboticization, this automation. People are worried about job losses, but it's not all bad news, is it? It's about redeploying assets and people doing more interesting work.
Absolutely. What this automation revolution is all about is taking the manual, mundane tasks away from the knowledge worker and actually replacing that workload with higher value added services and capabilities that are going to create more economic value and more business value and more value for the end customer.
Tell us more about robotics in front offices then. How does that work?
Well, if you think back to the automotive industry 30 years ago, factories were manned by tens of thousands of people. Today you go into an assembly plant like Nissan in the north of England, and actually there's very few people, it's mainly robots. That same automation paradigm is now happening in the white-collar environment.
And in terms of CTOs and CIOs overseeing that, this really is a sea change for them. It's really getting your head around a different way of looking at this.
Traditionally, CIOs have been a little bit remote from business services, other than those that relate to the IT domain. But when we're talking about shared service environments, what we're now talking about is creating a virtual workforce. So instead of having tens of thousands of people, we might have a few thousand people, but a robot farm, and that robot farm is the responsibility of the CIO, because it has to be hosted in a scalable cloud domain. It needs to be secure, it needs to be scalable so that the workload can fluctuate according to the rhythm of the business.
So we've talked about how robots make a difference then and how automation makes a difference. Let's go back to that customer experience. Something like 80% of voice-based customer interactions can then be flipped.
That's correct, yeah. So if we look at the call center industry where there's millions of people around the world employed, 80% of interactions today in a traditional customer engagement environment is done through the voice channel. Well, in our own environment, we've flipped that, where 80% of the interaction is done through a variety of digital omni-channels. The result have been, across 5 of our call centres that used to employ 24,000 people, now only 14,000 people are doing more than the workload of the original workforce.
It's incredible. When you hear the figures like that, it really is incredible. Give us an example then of a digitised business.
So a digitised business, for example, we have a client at the moment, one of the largest consumer product manufacturers in the world. There's 10,000 FTEs engaged in client-facing activities and then the support to those client-facing activities. So what we're doing right now is to build a digital hub and spoke where all of the transactional work will be run through that digital centre of excellence in a single location in the world, and then that same automation as a service platform will then be deployed in the captive client centres that are supporting the local market. So it's one common digital model in a partnership between HPE and that particular customer.
And that's all very rationalised, and it's great when you think about cutting down costs, but is it an absolute headache for HR directors, or can it work?
It works superbly because the people get redeployed into much richer, rewarding work than they were on before.
So, in terms of a revolution inside a business, this is going to affect front, middle and back office then?
Yeah, let me give you an example. A crop protection company in the Nordics, their number one problem is that their business is being disintermediated by wholesalers who commoditize the price, and it's a zero-sum game. So what we're doing with those guys is to actually build them a new business model to break out of that paradigm. And so what we're doing is to connect the chemical manufacturer with the end users of the product, so for example coffee bean farmers in Colombia, and we're using the Internet of Things and sensory devices to be able to monitor the crop yield coming off the farms. And then we're then using data scientists in a new service environment back in the corporate HQ to then provide information services back to the farmers in order to enable them to use their product far more effectively. That creates a one-to-one relationship, takes the wholesaler out of the domain, increases the profits of the company, increases the yield on coffee beans by 300%.
It really is incredible to hear those examples. You've talked about agriculture. Let's move on to financial services. What about selling mortgages?
So when it comes to selling mortgages, what you're looking to do is to take the people interaction completely out of the game. Now, if you want to open a new mortgage account, usually that would take 3.5, 4 weeks, a month or more. We can now do that in 3.5 minutes. And if it's, for example, a 20-step process that had 20 people involved in each one of those processes, we now have just 2 people. The rest is done on an automated self-service basis.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Mike Donnellan, Executive BPS Leader, thank you very much. I think we'll all give Mike a hand as well.